Hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about percent word problems. These are small word problems involving percents. So a couple things to review before we do this. Remember that a percent is always out of 100. So if we have 34%, that would be 34 over 100 if we make it into a fraction. Now we usually reduce our fractions in lowest terms, so that reduced to 17 over 50. But again, the way we get 17 over 50 is by putting it over 100. If we need to make 34% into a decimal, we would either divide it by 100 using our calculator, or simply move your decimal point over 2 places to the left. So in either case, it would be 0.34 as a decimal. We'll use some of these concepts today. One other concept I want to talk about is when you have a percent as a fraction. So let's say we have 7% and we make that into a fraction, which would be 7 over 100. Well, when you have your percent as a fraction, the numerator is what's called your is, what you're trying to look for or what you're trying to measure or determine. Your of is the total number of things you have, which is your denominator. So is your numerator when you have a percent as a fraction. Of is your denominator. That's your total number of things. Very important to understand. So the equation you're going to use to solve all these problems is equals of times percent. And this equation works to solve any small percent word problem. So again, if you remember, is the numerator of your fraction or what you're looking for. Of is the denominator or your total number of things. And your percent is given to you, you're trying to find it. So this is the equation we'll use. Now let's use it in an example problem so you understand how it works. So what is 4% of 60? So we're going to use that equation we just talked about, is equals of times percent. So we have three things. We have our is, our of, and our percent. If we read the problem carefully, we're given the percent, which is 4%. Now when you're using this equation, you always have to make your percent into a decimal. So if we make 4% into a decimal, it would be 0.04 or 0.04. Now, it says what is. So we don't know what 4% of 60 is. So that would be our x. The of, or the total, is 60. So we actually plug these in then. I'll circle the of so you can distinguish it. We don't know the is. That's x. Our of, or our total number of things, is 60. And our percent, which we make into a decimal, or we made into a decimal, was 0.04. So if you look at the equation, these are on the same side of the equation. So all we do to get our answer is multiply them together. So 60 times 0.04, using your calculator, is 2.4. So when you're trying to find the is or the of, that will be either an integer or a decimal. Okay? So our final answer is 2.4. That is 4% of 60. And by the way, when you're using this equation, the is equals of times percent, these two things, the of and the percent, are multiplied together on one side of the equation. All right? So let's do another. 56 is 2% of what number? So we're using the equation is equals of times percent. So we're going to identify these three things in the word problem. Whatever we don't know, we're going to let be our variable x. So 56 is, it looks like that's the portion that we're looking for. Okay. 2%, that's our percent. But remember, always make your percent into a decimal, 0.02. And it says of what number? So it looks like we're looking for the total number of things. We're going to let that be x. So we'll plug these values in. 56 is our is. The of we actually don't know, so that's going to be x. I'm just going to switch the order for a second. To percent we're given, it was 0.02. Now, some students will try to figure out like tricks to solve this equation because there is 3 ways, but I'd rather just have you have understanding of solving equations. Since we have 0.02 times x, the way we solve for x is we divide both sides by 0.02. So if we divide 56 by 0.02 using our calculator, we get 2,800. And that should make sense because we're given the is, and that's a 2%, a small percentage of 2,800. Let's do one more example. So 13 out of 20 is what percent? Well, if you have good knowledge of percents, you could do this without the equation. We'll talk about that in a second. But if you're using the equation to get your answer, we have is equals of times percent. Now, if we go around and circle things and label it, we're actually looking for the percent. Okay? Now, it's kind of weird word because or worded, excuse me, a little bit weird because it says 13 out of 20 is what percent, but we're looking for the percent. So our percent is going to be x. And we have to be a little careful, though, even though the word is before what percent, 13 out of 20, so that means the of is 20, and the is actually 13. Okay, so we're going to do 13 equals 20x. Now to solve that equation, since 20 is being multiplied to x, we divide both sides by 20. But the thing is, when we do this, you're going to get a decimal. So when you type this in your calculator, 13 divided by 20, you get 0.65. Well, if you remember from the beginning of the lesson, when we're using the equation is equals of times percent, this is a decimal. We have to make it a decimal if we're given it in a problem. So we actually have the decimal. So to make this to a percent, we just have to times it by 100. And we get 65%. So that's the way you can solve it using equations. If you have good knowledge of percents, remember, we talked about that the is the numerator and the of is your denominator percent problem. So all you have to do is divide 13 by 20 for this problem and then times your answer by 100. And that would be, again, if you're finding the percent. So let's do one more problem. 45 is 62% of what number? So we have is equals of times percent. Well, it says 45 is. That's our is. We don't know the total or the of, so we're going to let that be x. And we're given the percent in the problem, so we got to make that a decimal. 0.62. So we plug these in. Now, I usually put the number in front of the variable, even though the percent is second. 0.62x. Number of was x. Since we have a number multiplied to a variable, we divide both sides by 0.62. And using our calculator, 45 divided by 0.62. We're going to round this to the nearest hundredth. In our class, remember, we always round to the nearest hundredth, excuse me, unless I would specify otherwise. It's going to be 72.58 because there's a 0 after the 8. So we're going to keep that 8, if we're rounding to the nearest hundredth, the same. So hopefully this video lesson was helpful. If you have any questions, please see me in class and let me know. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a great day.